Hey, welcome to part 2 of order of operations, order of operations grouping symbols. We wanted to actually really spend some time on these grouping symbols because students seem to struggle with this. So here is a question. The question is 30 divided by, in parentheses, 2 plus 3. So if I go to my GEMDOS, which has just got crazy on me, look at that little A. I go through my GEMDOS, I say grouping symbols. Well, where are my grouping symbols? Here, I have parentheses here. And so if I have grouping symbols, that means I'm going to do them first. But what I do in them is whatever I see as I approach from left to right. So if there's more stuff in here, I would do all the stuff inside the grouping symbols using the order of operation again, and then simplify down. But in this case, I have just 2 plus 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. And I kept those brackets on there. I would keep them just in case there's something outside of the parentheses, but there isn't. So I really don't need those grouping symbols anymore because there's nothing to simplify inside the parentheses. So this just becomes 30 divided by 5. And then as I go through my order of operation, I see division, and 30 divided by 5 is 6. So my solution is 6. All right, come on up, somebody else. Woohoo! Boom! Brackets!
We are going to do the same process. Take a look at GEMDOS or GEMDOS up here, making sure that we're going to be doing our multiplication and division at the same time and our addition and subtraction at the same time. But we start with what?
Grouping!
Grouping symbols!
Grouping symbols!
You were too slow, Mr. Craig.
Oh, man.
So let's go look at our grouping symbols. We do have grouping symbols, but these are not parentheses. These are brackets. So we are going to do everything inside those grouping symbols first. Okay, 14 minus 12, we get 2. I'm going to leave it in the brackets, and I'm going to bring everything else down. All right, so I have 20 divided by 5 times 2. Well, let's go back to my order of operations. Do I have any more grouping symbols? Well, I do, but is there anything inside I can do inside those grouping symbols? No. So we're done with grouping symbols. Do I have any exponents or powers?
No.
No exponents or powers. Let's move on then. Now we're going to look for multiplication and division, but from left to right.
But, Mr. Craig, Mr. Nelson, don't I have to do the distributive property?
Well, that's actually a good question because a lot of people think that they need to distribute here and do 5 times 2. But remember that distribution is a form of multiplication, right? And yes, I know that multiplication comes first in the word GEMDOS, but what do we have to do? We have to look for multiplication and division from left to right. And if we're looking at my expression here, what comes first? The multiplication or the division?
Oh.
The division does, so that needs to come first. 20 divided by 5 is 4. We still have the times by 2 here. This is where most people make a mistake when it comes to order of operations. So only thing that's left is multiplication, and it is what comes next anyway in my GEMDOS. So 4 times 2 is 8.
Mr. Nelson, did I have to leave the brackets at that point, or?
No, technically at this point you do not need to leave the brackets. I like to keep them there just for good measure.
Okay.
Especially when you have more than one term inside the brackets.
Cool.
We'll get to that later.
All right, let's do another one. Another.
All right, let's do the next one.
That looks totally radical.
Totally radical, in the sense that we actually have a radical this time. Now remember, like we said a couple of slides ago, or on the last video lesson I believe it was, the radical, this little square root sign, is a grouping symbol. So going back over to GEMDOS here, or GEMDOS, you've got grouping first, which means let's simplify the radical first. I think I'm out of frame. So over here we've got 64 inside of the radical. What is the square root of 64? Can anyone tell me?
Ooh!
Yes, Mr. Nelson!
I raised my hand!
So did he. All right, so we've got square root of 64 is simplified down to 8, but the rest of this is still staying the same. So I'm just going to bring everything down. I've still got 6 plus 24 divided by 8. Now, in order from left to right, oh wait, we're still working from GEMDOS. So let's start over. We don't have any more grouping symbols. We already took care of the radical. Exponents.
Totally.
We don't have any exponents in this expression. So next we come across multiplication and division. Well, I only see one of those. I only see the division. So even though it's the second operation we have here, GEMDOS says it goes first. So 24 divided by 8 is anybody?
Ooh!
Yes, Mr. Craig.
3.
3. Well done. So we've got 3 from 24 divided by 8. And now let's bring down these 6 plus. Starting over from the beginning again, DOS, because that's just how we're going to work through this expression. G, grouping symbols. We have no more grouping symbols. Check. E, exponents. We have no exponents to deal with. Don't even worry about it. Multiplication and division. We already did our division. We don't have any multiplication or division left. So all that's left is addition and subtraction. We have addition. 3 plus 6 is 9.
Roger, roger.
Roger, roger. All right, Mr. Craig, help us out with the next one.
Oh, what? How come I got the hard one? Okay, so we have negative 22 minus 2 squared divided by 5 minus 3. And so some people would say, okay, well, this is GEMDOS, and grouping symbols are first, but there are no parentheses and there are no brackets, so duh, it's done. Well, actually, there are. They're actually invisible. They're kind of creepy. You can't see them, but they're here. And if you don't believe me, if I was to rewrite this problem without using it as a fraction, the way I would have written this problem would have been negative 22 minus 2 squared divided by 5 minus 3. These two problems are the same. And when you see it like this, you're like, oh, well, those are grouping symbols. But when you see it like this, you don't really see those grouping symbols. But you have to assume when you see a fraction, you've got grouping symbols. So that means I have to do everything in here and then everything in here before I can move on. Okay, so what does that mean? So I go over to this first one, or if I want to stay up here on this one, I'll do both. How about that? And I go to this first one, I say, okay, I got negative 22 minus 2 squared. So should I minus? No, because inside of my grouping symbols, I still go from left to right. I got to start over. Grouping symbols, check. Inside my grouping symbols, do I have any exponents? And the answer is I do. I have 2 squared. So if I was to rewrite this, I'd get negative 22 and negative 2 squared. This is where people get confused. Shouldn't that be positive 4 because a negative times a negative is a positive? The answer is no. And this is where it gets tricky. You have to remember this from last year. This 2 only touches this. Does it touch the negative sign? No. So it's actually minus 2 squared. And 2 squared is 4. However, had this been negative 2 squared, in this case, you see that the 2 is touching the parentheses. That means everything in it. That would be negative 2 times negative 2. So this is not that way. So we get positive 4. Then we bring over the 5 minus 3. And then again, people say, okay, well, which one do we do first, Mr. Craig? Because you're supposed to read from left and right. You're right, we do read from left to right, but we also read from left to right and from top to bottom. So we go left to right, but we also go top to bottom. So I'm going to do this top one first. So I get negative 22 minus 4. But they're both negative. So some of you may have learned to go like plus and negative, or some of you hopefully are old enough to just go, oh, duh. Negative 22 minus 4 is negative 26. I'm going to try to put it over here. And I can still have my grouping symbols there if I want. And then I have 5 minus 3. And now, again, I read from left to right. I look for grouping symbols. I have them on the bottom now. What's 5 minus 3? That's 2. So I have negative 26 over 2. Again, they still have grouping symbols. We just don't need to write to show them. And so the final part would be, what is negative 26 divided by 2? And that is negative 13. And I'm sorry I kind of drug to the side here. But if I show you the same problem here it seems a lot simpler because here you see the grouping symbol, so I can go negative 22. I got my exponent done. That's going to be negative 4 divided by 5 minus 3. Next, I can do my parentheses, or my grouping symbols again. Negative 22 minus 4 would be negative 26 divided by 5 minus 3, and then as I read from left to right again, I see more grouping symbols, and so I get negative 26, that's a horrible 6, divided by 2, and then finally, what's negative 26 divided by 2? We see that that equals negative 13. And so they both give me the same answer, but this way is a little bit clearer. I'm sorry it's a little more drawn out than maybe you want, but it's kind of important that you get this one. So we're going to try another one of those. Mr. Nelson, why don't you break it down? Because obviously I can't. Oh, no, sorry. End of the lesson.